Hello, everybody, and welcome to Author in the Spotlight, which is your chance to get to meet the authors in our upcoming book all around the topic of grief. Today, we are joined by the lovely Kari. Hello, Kari.
Hi, Cassie. Hi,
How are you doing?
thank you.
Awesome. Awesome. So, I'm going to hand straight over to you and just ask you to tell us a little bit about you and who you are, what you do, what you enjoy, that sort of thing.
I'm Kari, and I'm a coach, trainer, mentor, and down to you, Cassie. I'm an international best-selling author. And that's something that has been amazing. It's just been fantastic. It feels amazing to be able to call myself that. I'm known for working with parents. My background was as a parenting expert within safeguarding teams and also working with Oxford Brooks and My Strong Family on strengthening families around the UK. Previously, it's been 10 years now since I worked for the local authority. The reason I left was because things changed and ethically I couldn't tick boxes. I firmly believe that parents are the expert on their child. And there's just been some amazing research that Australia have published around doctors listening more to parents when their child is getting worse or isn't well, actually listening to parents because they know their child and they know when there is something that needs to be looked at or supported. And that's always been my sort of stance as a parenting expert is your child. One size doesn't fit all, and we have to listen to parents. But it's really hard because parents have been, if you like, de-skilled. Their confidence has been taken away. And there's so much noise around parenting with new parenting styles and new sort of ways of supporting families coming into place. And it gets confusing. So we can get lost and stop listening to that knowledge that we know we have. And I always say, start with you. As a parent, start with you. You'll then see things sort of roll into place. I don't work with parents to change the child. I work with parents to look at, what might help. What do they know? What do they think would work for their child? And then that rolled into doing some work as a coach in organizations around similar things, sort of listening to your team, being a leader that isn't about just meeting targets. If there's an issue, how can you resolve that? Conflict management, receiving feedback. It's really hard for leadership to receive honest feedback, because it might be something they don't want to hear. So it works in a way where I have deep empathy, I have my sort of skills and background, and that's the way I work. I look at practical strategies as well as looking at what will work for you. There's loads of parenting programs out there, and a lot of them are amazing. And I've delivered a lot of them. However, when I'm delivering a tool, I know that for some parents, it's not going to work. If you've got a child with neurodiversity, certain things aren't going to work unless you adapt them or you have the confidence to say, this is not a tool I can use. I can't put this in my toolbox. So that's something that is just so important to me, is that we get back. I would love to bust all the myths of parenting and all the myths of leadership, because a lot of parents go into work and it's about thriving in all areas of your life. And so just bust these myths that we have to sacrifice ourselves, that we have to be a martyr. And yes, our life changes when we have children, it does. However, it doesn't have to be a case of one or the other. Sorry, my internet just came up that it was unstable every time I record. So it's just about going that there isn't a magic wand. There isn't one way to parent, because children are all very different. Although development, we have, different things we look at. but it's understanding your child and understanding yourself. And if you start with that, when you become a parent and your child shines a spotlight on all those things that are unhealed, or all those things that you had pushed aside, like, what activates emotions, that you go, oh, okay, this is something I need to work on. And when I work on that, and I'm not taking it personally, the relationship and connecting with my child, connecting at work, being a better manager, leader, etc., partner, is going to happen. It does start with you. So that's me.
Amazing. I love your passion, and I love the passion, and I know, you've been involved in many things that I do, and it's a really a topic we could talk about for hours. So, but bringing back to this particular book, what was it that drew you to take part in the book about grief?
I experienced the death of my son. So my son only lived for 12 minutes. It was 37 years ago. And the reason I wanted to be involved is because somebody actually said to me just before his birthday this year, surely by now you've got over it. And that hit me quite hard. And I thought, but why do I have to get over it? It's not something you get over. And I know that so much of what I experienced happens to other parents too, and loss is loss. There's no hierarchy. One loss is not more important, although people will sort of try to make out there's a high. There isn't. Loss is loss. And I've experienced other loss. But that just hit me when someone said, shouldn't you have got over this by now? And I was like, if that was said to somebody that maybe was only 5 years, only 4 years, who's putting a time limit on this? So I wanted to share that story, and I wanted to also let others know that they're seen, and whichever way you deal with your grief is very personal. There are so many theories, the different stages of grief. Well, the creators of that, they've already said, well, actually, we would probably change it, or we would add a couple, or we might. And so a theory is great, but it doesn't mean that that's what real life is. And having worked with you before, Cassie, I knew, it would be a supportive process. It would be something that if I was struggling, I knew I could talk to you. It was a very hard chapter to write. And I did go in, and I recognize on reflection, I did go into a little bit of distance writing, a little bit more leaning into the experience, because, it takes you right back. When you remember things, it takes you right back. So you are feeling it as though it happened. So every time, there's a great dating show at the moment on Netflix called Love on the Spectrum. And I didn't talk about this in my book, but afterwards, after, going back, and they did an autopsy, and they did a sort of investigation into what happened. And I was told there was a huge likelihood that my son would have had learning difficulties, and there would have been developmental issues. And every time I see a child or an adult of the same age as I've always sort of had this that could have been Stanley. And I want him to be remembered, and I want him to be celebrated, because he was part of our life for a very short physical time. But, he will carry on as a memory, or on, if you like, the family tree forever. And that's what I wanted as well. So that's the reason I wanted to be involved.
Amazing. And you've sort of touched on it. I was going to say how did you find the writing process, because it's very different to when you're writing like an information piece or something like that. And obviously you said there's that allowing yourself to feel, but obviously knowing um when to try and create that distance because of things that come up.
Yeah.
um so yeah, and then it's a very powerful chapter. It's a very powerful book, obviously, given the nature. So I would highly recommend reading Kari's chapter, because it's also what I wanted for this book was to give people the voice to share things that aren't often spoken about. So, different types of death, or things that aren't always around death, and allowing you that space to try and help in the healing, in your healing journey. Because I don't know if you found that with the writing, if it helped process or anything like that. Did you find it help?
Yeah, it did. It helped with the slight feeling of anger when somebody said that to me about I should have got over it by now. Um, and then reflecting on it, it was, and I do reflect on that, you know, death and loss is something that we will all experience, whether it's somebody's physical death or not. It's part of life. And you touched on it, but we do not like to talk about it. It's something that we shy away from. I
Yeah.
was recently, a journalist talked to me about children being allowed to funerals. And so I sort of shared a few sort of my thoughts and feelings around it. And it's like, we have this, well, we can't talk about death to our children because we don't want to upset them, or we don't want them to be sad. And children know. And some of the things that are said to children without meaning to, because it's done in a very loving way, can impact them. So, oh, they fell asleep and they're not going to wake up. And I've known children where it then becomes children won't fall asleep because they have this fear they're not going to wake up. And it's about, the more we can talk about it, the more we can have conversations around it, the more we understand it's so sad, and we carry, the grief for many years. And although our world gets bigger, the grief itself doesn't get smaller. It's just our world gets bigger. I like that. I was told that afterwards. And
Yeah.
I liked that, because I thought, because for a while it feels like that is your world,
Yes.
and you feel guilty when you're not thinking or you're not feeling sad, because you should do. Or, and I touched briefly on it, when someone who hasn't been well, or finally dies, the guilt, because you love them and you miss them, but there's a guilt because you also feel that relief for them, not necessarily for you, but for them. And we don't
Yeah.
talk about that either. And it's
No.
like, oh, how can you like that? So it's trying to just, and I know a lot of your books, all your books that I've been involved with and the ones I haven't are absolutely amazing, because it's talking about these tough subjects, or things that everyone else is talking about, but no one's really talking about them. Nobody's really saying, what it's like to feel it, to walk through it. Um, and I just think, especially this, it's so important, because you do think, oh, I can't talk about that. I've talked enough about that now. Or, yeah, very British of us. Okay, like, okay, no, I can't be sad in this situation. I can't, I've got to get back to it. And it's like, no, feel how you feel. And if it
Yeah.
feels tough, it feels tough. It's not always
100%.
going to be as hard, but it will be if you keep just pressing it down.
Yeah.
It will
Yeah.
still be there,
Yeah.
and
And
we know,
it's
yeah.
yeah.
So
And
yeah,
it's
but so yeah,
yeah. Yeah. And it's about giving. So I do, in the introduction, I talk about the analogy of the ball and the jar, and some of those different things, because everyone's grief is unique to them. There is no comparison. There is no, well, this one was worse, or there is no time limits. And I as I say, I do talk about that, because they're the things that really wind me up. And it's like it doesn't matter where you are. It's acknowledging where you're at and allowing that without judgment, without an expectation that, you know, whatever after our however many years. Because again, I wrote in mine, you know, when you lose someone or something, a piece of you has gone. So you can't
Yeah.
just get over that. But society
Yeah.
seems to have this perception. So it is a very it's just an honest thing about how I feel about it and how I feel society is, as well as trying to help people be seen and validated in what they are experiencing as well.
Mm.
And that's why, and I'm just very grateful that you have been a part of the book. And obviously, if people resonate with your chapter or want to reach out to you, then your Linktree link will be with this interview, and then people can connect with you in that way. So thank you so much for joining us today, Kari. Before we just close off, is there anything else you wanted to talk about or mention just as we wrap up?
Just if you're watching this and you haven't bought the book, buy it. And maybe you can't read it all. Maybe you can't read it for a while, but it's going to really help with any of those feelings. Or if you know someone that's going through it and you want to know how to, maybe approach it, get the book, because it really helps. I had people cross the road who just didn't know what to say to me, and that was hard. And I always say to people, saying I don't know what to say is as good as saying something, poignant or, amazing. But it's just a subject that we really do need to talk about more.
Thank you. And thank you again for joining us today. And please do join us again for another author in the spotlight very soon. But for now, we will say goodbye. Take care, everybody. Bye bye.